and Mato Rokuro is an ugly orphan who can't riz girls, but his history is denser than a black hole. Back in the day, at a tender age of 12, he faced the Hinatsuki tragedy, kissed goodbye to exorcism, and swore to never ever turn back. Until Adashino Benio comes into his life, and now he's not just back into exorcism but practically expected to marry her. Presently, Benio is all set to bid goodbye to Kyoto and level up as an all-powerful exorcist at Seika Dormitory. Little does she know, there's a bigger exorcist in town, and it's none other than Rokuro, who's currently getting rejected once again. He runs away embarrassed, only to go crash into Otomi Mayura, his childhood friend and fellow survivor, possibly the only girl with a secret fat crush on him. Meanwhile, on her way to Seika, Benio encounters a group of impurity at the station and enters the Magano for a battle. The attack alerts Seika Dormitory, prompting Zenkichi, the head of Seika, Rokuro's older brother Ryogo, and fellow exorcists Satsushi and Shinosuke to handle the situation. Before heading out, Ryogo asks Rokuro to join the gang, but the brat runs away to a bridge, frustrated over the constant pressure to rejoin exorcism. As he stands there, reminiscing about the past, Benio descends from the sky, exhausted from battling impurity. Luckily, Rokuro catches her in time, but is very annoyed to find how withdrawn Benio is. The woman literally inhales ohagi that she bought from the poor guy's allowance with absolutely no apologies. Yet, despite the munching, she's eerily silent. Nevertheless, while they are making their way back, two kids cycle past the duo, making Rokuro miss his old dead buddies from Hinatsuki. However, just as they pass by, an impurity attack pulls the kids into the Magano. Immediately, Benio enters the Magano, pulling Rokuro with her and making him realize she's an exorcist as well. He is totally surprised to see how freaking good she is, until a supermassive impurity rises out of nowhere. A far bigger opponent for Benio. Despite that, she orders Rokuro to leave with the kids, handing him a talisman to exit the Magano. She then drops the sixth statement, saying she'll kill all evil impurity before going Batman. However, her statement makes Rokuro twitch. The impurity almost turns Benio into a ghost. When Rokuro finally springs into action, telling her to not talk all grand if she can barely execute. Turns out, Benio's statement had reminded him of the exact same dream he had at 12 years old. In other words, it triggered the dude's trauma. With that, he activates his super-duper exorcist arm, lands a single most brutal punch, and turns the impurity into dust. Benio's left surprised, and Rokuro, well, he's still trying to cure his ugliness. He turns to Benio, saying that his power is more of a curse, only for the woman to stomp on his feet. She's as green as a Shrek with jealousy. The two part on quite a bad note, only for Rokuro to arrive and see the whole of Seika Dormitory attending to Benio. It's not long before he realizes that she's going to be living with them, and he loses it, until dudes almost gets chomped down by her crazy loyal familiar, Kanako, and leaves angrily. That night, Benio can't resist and literally breaks into Rokuro's room, asking him to do a match with her. She's desperate to redeem her self-esteem, but Rokuro kicks her out with all his might and makes it clear that he hates exorcists, and only fought to save her because it was absolutely necessary. The conversation is heard by Ryogo, who is waking up others for another impurity face-off. Nevertheless, Benio joins Ryogo, Atsushi, and Shinosuke, and the four arrive at the site. They head to the battleground, where Benio takes center stage, slicing through impurities with the finesse of a sushi chef on a roll. Little do her teammates know, in her head, she's fuming over Rokuro being better than her. Nevertheless, on their way back, Ryogo asks if Rokuro really fought in front of Benio. She confirms it, and he explains how Rokuro was once a brilliant exorcist until the trauma from the Hinatsuki tragedy made him totally stop. Turns out, Rokuro's biggest dream back then was to annihilate all impurity and become the Chuck Norris of exorcists. Shockingly, it aligns perfectly with Benio's dream, leaving us to wonder if they're destined to be the ultimate duo or just the champions of drama. That morning, the so-called super exorcist barges in on Benio taking a shower, and the two break out in a chase until Rokuro crashes into Arima, the leader of all exorcists. This guy, in all his glory, is rocking literal boxers. Nevertheless, Arima instructs Zenkichi to round up everyone in the Hall of Five Mirrors. Once the gang assembles, Arima, with his holly-jolly personality, announces that the battle against impurity is about to wrap up because the long-foretold super-duper exorcist, the Miko, is on its way. To everyone's surprise, he then calls up Benio and even Rokuro, declaring them as the twin stars, and asks them to have a match. Unlike Rokuro, Benio's all ready to jump him like some deranged street cat. So Arima triggers Rokuro's trauma, inciting him to engage in the match and finally giving the crowd an epic fight to witness. Nevertheless, he stops them just in time before walking up to Rokuro and apologizing for insulting his dead friends. Arima then announces that the Miko will come from the union of the all-powerful twin stars. In other words, the two of them gotta marry. Upon hearing that, poor Rokuro is left wide-eyed, like he's just witnessed the Grim Reaper itself, and suddenly, he's plagued by nightmares featuring him and Benio playing house as a married couple. The next morning, as they get ready for school, the duo dives straight into bickering mode, much to the delight of Etsushi and Shinosuke, who happily add fuel to the fire. Not just that, but Benio ends up in Rokuro's class as the hot newcomer, irritating him even more. Mayura notices his bad mood as well. Outside, Ryogo and company are busy battling all the impurity that strangely keep multiplying like rabbits and giving them a hard time. Back at school, Rokuro lastly fails at football, unlike Benio, who keeps gaining more social points, showcasing her smooth buttery skills. Meanwhile, poor Mayura's big talents keep getting in the way. The guys even suggest Rokuro should consider dating Mayura since his luck is nowhere to be found. But he quickly shuts that down, claiming that she's more like a little sister. Later, when Mayura tries to eat with Benio, she vanishes up to the school roof. There she senses the strong impurity presence and leaves school early, telling Mayura to cover for her. Rokuro does not join her at all. Soon she plops down in the Megano to give the guys a hand, and Ryogo, for a second, feels a similarity between her and Rokuro. Back at school, Mayura whisks Rokuro away to an amusement park to cheer him up. The two enjoy some rides, and Rokuro turns as pale as a ghost during the adventure. After the excitement settles, Rokuro notices a bunch of kids fooling around, bringing back memories of his old pals from Hinatsuki. Little do they know, Benio and the gang are busy battling impurity nearby. One of the big impurities stumbles and crashes into the roller coaster which the kids were riding. The thing literally shatters, leaving the cars hanging. Rokuro's trauma immediately makes him jump and save the kids just before the whole roller coaster crashes. Meanwhile, Benio slashes the impurity ruthlessly down the middle and through its poor junk, making Ryogo wonder if she can bring back Rokuro to exorcism. Nevertheless, on their way back, Rokuro thanks Mayura for being worried and taking him to the park. She asks if there's anything bothering him. Rokuro dismisses it as just being a casual mess in the exorcism world, but thanks her for making him feel better and leaves only to run into Ryogo, Benio, Atsushi, and Shinosuke coming back from the hunt. Meanwhile, somewhere, Arima announces about the twin stars to the 12 guardians. However, one of them, Shimon, seems to have some doubts about Rokuro's abilities. One evening, Benio was deep in a solo chat talking to her dead brother and dreaming about being the ultimate exorcist, when suddenly Ryogo pops in asking her to encourage Rokuro back into exorcism. He's on a mission to get Rokuro back into the exorcism game, claiming that Rokuro is his true self when he's fighting. He wants him to embrace that path again. It makes Benio comment that Ryogo really cares for that idiot, making him smile and tell her that he and the exorcists are the only family Rokuro's got. Later, while sorting through talismans, Ryogo finds an old one and grins. But the next morning, things take a turn for the worse when Ryogo pushes Rokuro's buttons a bit too much, once again asking him to join the exorcisms and then scolding him over homework. Rokuro storms off, throwing a tantrum. While he roams the city, Ryogo, Atsushi, and Shinosuke decide to do some deliveries. They swing by the Iron Branch, where Ryogo meets Fushihara, a hotshot who battles impurities that mess with kids. Next on the agenda is an impurity exorcism at an old, spooky house. There, the three enter Megano, and Shinosuke explains how the owner had rented the place out to people, but strangely they keep going missing. Meanwhile, poor Rokuro gets cornered by an old lady from his childhood hangout. He used to often visit the place with Ryogo. Woman literally starts interrogating the poor cherry boy's kissing history while bribing him with his favorite treats, until he finally escapes and she's left yelling that he can drop by anytime. Back at the haunted house, Ryogo and the gang stumble upon a weird room, and as soon as they enter, a heavy, eerie vibe takes over. Ryogo jumps into Megano only to immediately get ambushed by a gigantic two-headed impurity. It tosses Atsushi and Shinosuke back to reality, leaving Ryogo all alone. When Rokuro returns to Seika, he finds the place empty. It's not long before Atsushi and Shinosuke show up all tattered and tired. They tell him about Ryogo panicking Rokuro to the core, and without giving it a second thought, he bursts into Benio's room, bows down, and desperately begs her to save Ryogo. Back in the Megano, poor Ryogo's getting badly beaten. He tries hiding, but with all his enchantments powering down, he's left brutally cornered and injured. When suddenly Rokuro shows up out of nowhere, Saitama punching the hell out of that impurity and blasting one of his head off. Benio arrives as well, slashing all the mini ones. Rokuro then rushes up to Ryogo, who weakly shows him the old servant talisman that Rokuro had once given him at the old lady's hangout. Back then, Rokuro had plans to make Ryogo his servant once he becomes the all-powerful exorcist. Rokuro smiles, but sadly their mini moment is interrupted by the now one-headed impurity. He then irritatingly beats Benio to it and finishes the thing for good. Later on, he waits for Benio outside the house and genuinely thanks her. To his surprise, she comments how cool Rokuro looks when fighting. But that doesn't last long, and the two returns to their husband-wife bickering once again. somewhere before the big shot 12 Guardians. Arima explains that the impurity invasion around Narukami, close to Seika Dormitory, is crazier than anywhere else and assigns Shimon the duty to investigate. Meanwhile, Rokuro pays a visit to Ryogo at the hospital and almost tells him that he'll rejoin exorcism. But Ryogo cuts him off, telling him not to push himself. Rokuro then arrives home to find everyone making talismans and praising Benio's skills. He joins them as well with looks of an ugly loser. Kanako as usual makes quite a scene out of it when suddenly, Zenkichi bursts in telling them of an impurity attack. To everyone's surprise, Rokuro shows willingness to go and they tease him the whole way. Nevertheless, Shinosuke hands Rokuro a talisman holder that Ryogo had made for him and he smiles. The gang rolls up at an elementary school and finds the teacher desperately looking for a couple of missing kids. They head into Magano and right away and spot evil impurities hunting down the school kids. The group falls into action, eliminating most of them, but the impurity bounce back, blocking Atsushi and Shinosuke from escaping the Magano with the rescued little ones. Rokuro tries countering them with his bullet talisman, but one of them punches Shinosuke hard, leaving the kids at the creature's mercy. The sight once again triggers Rokuro, but luckily they manage to help the kids out in time. However, an impurity spots Rokuro distracted and grabs him from behind. But before it could turn him into a human jam, something bolts the impurity into a smoke show. Out of it walks a red-haired kid, Shimon. He bears his vermilion wing sword and fizzes off the rest of the impurity before getting into a bicker with Rokuro. However, Benio recognizes him immediately and Kanako tells everyone that Shimon's literally one of the 12 Guardians. The dude then gifts out a punch to poor Rokuro, saying he's a disgrace to exorcists for getting distracted. He turns to Benio, apologizing that she has to put up with this guy, making Rokuro even more steamed when Benio agrees. Just then, a massive gorilla impurity rises up and Shimon immediately readies himself only for Benio to stop him. She explains that Rokuro may have the IQ of an ancient human, but he's by no means weak. With that, Rokuro cuts through and once again obliterate the gorilla in one go, proving Benio right. Shimon then feels something weird, but when he looks around, no one's there. However, he's right because there was a strange man watching them. Suddenly, his phone rings. It's Arima, calling him back to Kyoto. Turns out, the dude just sent him to give the twin stars a little nudge. But Shimon's highly suspicious of that strange feeling from earlier. At school, everyone's totally captivated by Benio's mysterious vibe. Despite girls trying to chat her up, she bolts out of school early, leaving everyone gossiping like it's the town news. Some guys even suggest she's running with delinquents, and that freaks out poor Mayura. From then on, Mayura goes full-on detective, trying to be Benio's best friend. She invites her to a sleepover, only for Benio to turn her down and even tries to help her with exercise. But, whoops, her own talents end up bugging Benio. In the end, Benio finally confronts her, making Mayura boldly reply that she doesn't want her to hang out with dangerous people. Thinking that she's talking about exorcists, Benio comments that she wants to hang out willingly, confusing her further. Back at home, everyone welcomes Ryogo with a feast. He wants to pick up on impurity hunting immediately, but Rokuro notices his injured arm and volunteers to help. Ryogo shines up, coddling an annoyed Rokuro and happy to see him slipping back into his element. Meanwhile, at home, Mayura decides to not give up on Benio. The following day, Benio remains home on Ryogo's request. He takes Rokuro with him instead, reasoning that he wants to see what Rokuro can do. Unluckily, Mayura catches up to Benio on her morning run and ends up taking her to an ohagi place. She's pleased to see Benio enjoy and once again pushes her let's be friends agenda when suddenly the aura turns heavy, a sign of an impurity attack. Benio immediately enters Magano to save a lady and Mayura finally realizes that she's an exorcist and not some creep like she suspected. Meanwhile, Rokuro obliterates a massive impurity that almost took out Ryogo and others. Nevertheless, once Benio manages to save the lady, Kanako comments that Mayura must have run off by now. Yet, surprise, the moment they step out, a worried Mayura hugs Benio, making her finally give up. On their way back, the two talk and Benio realizes that Mayura is Zenkichi's granddaughter. She finally tells her that she's living at the Seika dormitory. That evening, when Rokuro and others return all beat up, they are greeted by Benio and an annoyed Mayura. She's totally pissed off over Rokuro keeping Benio's details a secret and knocks the dude down. Meanwhile, somewhere Zenkichi spots something bad. Back at the headquarters, Shimon searches for Arima only to come across two of the 12 Guardians, Subaru and Tatara, sipping tea. Subaru tells Shimon that Arima has already left for Seika, and much to Rokuro's disappointment, that's true. Arima happily tells both Benio and Rokuro to get ready for a trial that supposedly will upgrade their skills as the twin stars. But this creep has some dirty tricks up his sleeve. The man drives them around the city and brings the two to a holiday villa, showing them around all the cool, relaxing stuff until the bedroom tour comes around and the situation finally settles in. He's got a plan to make the two do the deed and have Miko as soon as possible. Rokuro fittingly sets the dude flying, leaving a meteor dent in the wall. He's seething, but there's more to come. Surprisingly, even Zenkichi and Benio's attendant, Kinu, is in favor. Arima then leaves the two to live alone in hopes of the obvious and even takes away Kanako. Once alone, Rokuro leaves for his separate bedroom and totally loses it while Benio is much calmer and tries to move the furniture around. But it won't budge, and for good reason. Suddenly, the walls go down, merging the two bedrooms into one and tilting it. Arima's annoying buck face soon pops up, announcing that both of their spell potentials are blocked and now they have to work together and reach the vent on the other side of the room. Rokuro takes the lead only to fall, similar to his luck with women. Benio then hops onto the bed and in the process flashes Rokuro a little, turning him red. Girl was gone commando underneath there. Nevertheless, the two try to get past and soon Rokuro makes the jump only to land on top of poor Benio. Arima's literally having a wild time watching the whole thing while Kanako's head seems to pop out any second from anger. After a couple sorries, lots of red faces and attempts to not get flashed, the two finally make it into the vent when suddenly Ryogo rings them calling for help. The two luckily manage to make it through and arrive on site just in time. Once it's done and dusted, Rokuro points out that Benio's hair tie's missing and she freaks out because it was a gift from her late brother. Rokuro then pulls her back to the vent and manages to find it. Later on, Benio finally breaks the ice and confides in Rokuro, telling him that she was separated from her brother as a kid and later got the news that he was killed thanks to the impurities. Rokuro also reveals that he was literally abandoned and taken in by the exorcists as a child. However, their sweet moment was destined to cut short once the two classically started fighting again. Later at Hinatsuki Ruins, Seijin, one of the 12 guardians, pays a visit and strangely enough inside the dormitory sits a photo of Benio's family. Back at the holiday villa, Mayur is absolutely losing it upon hearing Arima's exorcist's plans and totally disagrees with the idea of Rokuro rejoining exorcism. However, Benio interrupts, reasoning that Rokuro's ability has helped save people, but her defending Rokuro kind of pisses Mayura off and the two start arguing, in the process of which they end up describing Rokuro having the personality of a peanut. Poor dude's heart is shattered. In the end, Mayura stomps off angrily, thinking about how broke Rokuro was after Hinatsuki and totally unaware that she's about to become some impurities mac and cheese. Back at the villa, Kanako picks up a protection charm belonging to Mayura. Rokuro comments that she never goes anywhere without the thing, making Benio tell him that such charms are used by people with high spell power to stay safe from the impurities. The two horrifyingly realize that she's probably getting hunted and rush out immediately. Poor Mayura gets sucked into the Magana and almost devoured, but luckily Rokuro arrives, fisting the impurity right in its skull. Mayura falls unconscious into his arms just as Benio shows up as well, and the two hotshot exorcist Power Rangers ready themselves to face the weirdly satanic impurity before them. This guy looks extra creepypasta, probably because of the strange man sitting nearby and watching the whole drama. Meanwhile, at the Seika dormitory, Zenkichi and Kinu find poor Atsushi stumbling out of the house only to peek in and find Seijin chilling. He confronts Zenkichi, mentioning that he's probably sensed the odd atmosphere. Seijin says he's here to teach a certain misbehaving pupil a lesson and also to handle the impurity corruption mess. Meanwhile, Benio and Rokuro are still going at it with impurity. Lucky for them, Seijin shows up just in the nick of time, slicing and dicing the thing like it's cake. Then, he turns to Rokuro, hitting him with a sarcastic hello. Turns out, this dude is Mayura's dad and the master who trained Rokuro and all the dead Hinatsuki kiddos. Seijin grabs hold and angrily confronts Rokuro for using his wild exorcist arm. He brings up the not-so-great stuff Rokuro did back at Hinatsuki. To Benio's horror, Seijin reveals that Rokuro had himself killed all the Hinatsuki kids. Meanwhile, back at Seiko, Kinu goes stunned once Zenkichi reveals that Rokuro survived the Hinatsuki tragedy. He explains that the impurity corruption Seijin was referring to is a state in which a person's spell potential itself morphs them into an impurity. But most importantly, he reveals that Benio's twin brother, Yudo, was one of the trainees at the Hinatsuki dormitory, which is exactly what Seijin reveals to Benio, shocking both her and Rokuro. Benio puts two and two together, realizing that Rokuro offed her brother. She steps forward, eyes going all wild, swords drawn and ready to go medieval on the guy. But before the girl can shred the dude into human ribbons, Seijin stops her trying to complete the story. Only he's cut short by the strange man finally making his grand entrance. And to their absolute shock, it's none other but Yudo, Benio's twin brother who was supposedly skeletons. Turns out he's the menacing pupil Seijin here for and has committed some grave stuff. Rokuro's beyond enraged to see him, screaming that he caused the Hinatsuki tragedy. Yet the guy calmly flips the whole thing onto him. 2 years back, Yudo pulled a stunt at the Hinatsuki dormitory, gathering all the kids for some creepy stuff. He promised them powers to match Rokuro, but surprise, surprise, it was all a rotten trick. His chanting ended up corrupting the kids, turning them into impurities one by one. Rokuro, poor guy, had to watch 3 of his buddies, Chiko, Yuna, and Hikari, bite the dust, and it made him go all Mad Hatter. Seijin explains the whole thing to Benio, who's totally confused. He explains the impurity corruption and that the only way to save the kids was to kill them, which is exactly what Rokuro did. Back then, seeing his pals kick the bucket took a toll on Rokuro. His exorcist arm and the energy inside went bonkers, turning him into a deadly killing machine. Benio can't believe her ears. Her once sweet, supportive bro was playing Free Fire with some dark magic. And to her horror, Yuta himself goes on to slam Benio, spilling that he never really supported her and finds her utterly useless, leaving her all teary. Rokuro breaks free, charging at a calm Yuta. This dude's got a purple arm like Rokuro's, but way stronger. He's absolutely unscratched despite Rokuro madly attacking him. Out of the blue, Benio jumps in between, stopping Rokuro from beating himself up but getting tossed aside like a ragdoll. That settles Rokuro down, and he rushes to her side. Behind them, Yuta invites Rokuro to join his gang, but my guy screams back a big fat no. Anyway, he hops away, and Rokuro, Benio, and Seijin, carrying Mayura, exit from the Magano. Outside, Benio breaks down, apologizing to Rokuro on behalf of her bro. But guess what? The two are finally on the same wavelength. With that, the two of them join hands and decide to get stronger together to bring down Yuto for good. They end up pleading with Seijin to train them further, but he gives them the cold shoulder. Left with nothing else, they head back to the villa, only to find Subaru chilling in the living room and Tatara munching on bread crusts. At first, Rokuro is taken aback until Benio comes in and surprisingly reveals that Subaru was her master. Rokuro's irritated with all the Arima-induced newlywed fantasies Subaru keeps bringing up. But once he learns that she's one of the 12 guardians, he immediately asks her to train them. Benio joins in as well, and surprisingly Subaru agrees. Subaru wastes no time and already hands out the twin stars their first tasks. For some reason, they end up at a store getting all dressed until Subaru arrives, mocking Rokuro for not being able to compliment Benio. He's super annoyed when she hands them their next task to ironically hold hands. Both of them can barely bring themselves to touch each other and keep making creepy faces. Nevertheless, even Benio begins questioning her master's training methods but decides to go along for old time's sake. Meanwhile, on the river, a Magano gate opens for Benio and Rokuro. However, things keep getting worse and they end up at some cliché lovey-dovey cafe forced to feed each other heart-shaped pancakes. By now, the two realize Subaru's probably sent by Arima to complete his Miko agenda and abandon the training. They stop by a Nohagi place. Rokuro tells Benio to get as much as she wants since it'll pay out of the underpants guy, Arima's pocket, and the two ends up munching away happily when suddenly Kanako alerts them of the impurity at the river. Both of them enter the Magano to find the impurities trying to spill into reality. However, once Rokuro fires up his arm, it becomes unruly. Ever since meeting Yuta, he's unable to control it, but lucky him, Benio puts on a restraining talisman on it, helping him calm down. As a result, she grows weak and the two are left hugging each other surrounded by impurities. Just then, Subaru comes in together with Tatara. The woman's literally a dolled up Lara Croft because she brings out some sick guns and begins fizzing away the impurity. Meanwhile, Tatara showcases his violent exorcist powers, the craziest out of all 12 guardians. With that, Subaru heals the breach between Magano and reality and the twin stars return to their villa. Sadly for Rokuro, Subaru walks down dressed as if she's about to give them a show. The woman refuses to give up and claims she gotta train them for some important activity. And we all know what those are, don't we? The next day, Subaru's got them doing designing, which Rokuro thinks is as pointless as a screen door on a submarine. Benio claims it chills out Rokuro's wild hand, but she's so into her own stuff that she sews her dress to the fabric, treating poor Rokuro to the Commando Flash number 2. Meanwhile, Subaru's outside, binge-watching cringy rom-coms and bossing Rokuro and Benio around. She tries to teach Rokuro the chronicles of a woman's mind, pushing the poor guy to the brink. Rokuro's had enough of her nonsense, but he can't count on Benio to keep his arm in check forever. So, he begs Subaru to train him. Subaru starts off with a game of hide and seek. Rokuro's feeling confident for a hot second until the woman disappears right before their eyes. Benio and he sieve the whole villa, and in process Benio comes across one of Rokuro's magazines. Poor guy gets kicked, but thanks to that, a note slips out from the mag. Turns out this was all framed by Subaru. They then head outside, and their adventure keeps rolling, landing them at an eatery where Subaru has left them a massive bill. Rokuro's allowance once again bites the dust. However, this time Benio remembers when Subaru had wanted to diet. At first, Rokuro finds the information totally useless, but then he puts 2 and 2 together and they quickly crash into a gym only to find Tatara dressed up as Subaru. They hit the road again, starting another fight when suddenly a dark aura shows up and the two immediately enter Magano to find a massive squid impurity that's way too hard for them to defeat. The thing squirts ink, blocking the two's vision and leaving them totally unable to attack. It is then that the two realize the importance of connecting telepathically. They recall Subaru's lessons, and just like that, the twin stars finally unite, slicing the squid into a nice seafood platter. Just as they do so, Subaru appears behind them, cheering. She comments how Rokuro's arm is no longer going bonkers and points it out as progress. Finally, Subaru prepares to leave, but not before giving Benio another tip to one of Rokuro's steamy magazines and once again getting him kicked. One day, Rokuro's down in the basement practicing. He makes his way upstairs and finds the villa filled with some creepy smell. Turns out, it's Benio having her attempt at making dinner. The curry looks terrible than a 90-year-old's rotten vomit, and it fittingly sends Rokuro almost fainting. But Benio's so confident she even dishes out a classic Benio's special drink, which is far worse than the curry. Rokuro almost attempts to doze off by giving it a try, only to find himself rolling on the floor. He gets up angrily, telling Benio he's in charge of dinner. Benio angrily defends her crap food before heading out for a job. Meanwhile in Kyoto, Arima walks into a meeting with the 12 Guardians. Shimon reports his part until Arima asks the updates on Benio and Rokuro from Subaru. She reports it as largely being a failure, but specifically points out Rokuro's crazy exorcist ability. Arima then leaves with an expression colder than an ice. Back in Narukami, Benio comes across a mother-daughter duo. It makes her remember her own parents, who were actually a powerful exorcist couple, only to snap out of it once the face of an impurity hauntingly pops up in her head. She continues jogging, missing homemade meals and refusing to return home and eat the Rokuro special. Suddenly Kanako pops out screaming that an impurity's nearby, and Benio, being the impatient woman she is, immediately enters the Magano. There, before she can even kill the impurity, a man pierces right through the thing, and this guy is not human. He quickly knocks Benio down. With that, he asks if she knows the twin stars, threatening to kill her, and starts counting down to 1. Benio go all crazy as flashbacks remind her of an impurity back from her childhood. It had counted down similarly to this non-human entity, and it was none other but Kamui, an impurity that killed her parents. Benio goes Rokuro level crazy, charging and screaming. But she's no more powerful than a banana peel to the dude. The entity is crazy strong and has her literally seconds away from death when Rokuro appears out of nowhere and sends him flying. Turns out he'd been wandering around, searching for Benio with her dinner. Benio can't be more touched. However, for now, Kamui rises back up, walking towards them with a broken neck and kind of surprised at Rokuro's potential. He's finally found his match. Meanwhile, Arima's up in a plane, chilling, when Zenkichi hits him up all freaked out. He cuts him off, saying that he knows a Basara has appeared in Narukami, a human-looking impurity that has evolved into some demon-level monster by feeding on dark matter, and that is exactly what Kamui is. Luckily, before Kamui can make a lethal charge, another impurity interrupts him, giving Rokuro and Benio enough time to escape. Outside, Rokuro quickly patches Benio up, and the first thing she does is try to bolt back into the Magano. She keeps talking about avenging her parents' death and killing Kamui for good. She tells Rokuro she's been on the hunt for him forever, and now that he's finally here, she can't chicken out. According to her, facing her parents or living on isn't an option if she backs down. Rokuro, who has been listening to her sob story, points out that she can barely stop shaking, let alone fight. However, he realizes how similar Benio is to him. Rokuro then hands her the dinner to eat up and tells her he's going to go hold up Kamui until she's fueled back. He says that it's thanks to her that he's back into exorcism, and so he owes her one. With that, he goes back in to face Kamui, who on the other hand begins heartlessly describing the details of how he killed Benio's parents. He puts his hand forward, explaining how he had asked the parents to make a grim choice between them or their daughter, and once they chose Benio, he crushed their heads to pulp. Poor Benio was only 8. Rokuro goes nuts at that and manages to flip him. But this guy's as tough to kill as a tick, and Rokuro has pissed him off now. To his horror, Kamui brings out a spirit talisman, powers up those impurity legs, and almost dances him to death when suddenly Benio makes a re-entry. This time she's stronger, yet Kamui still karate kicks her down. That's when Rokuro catches her. The two hold Benio's sword together and for the first time resonate as twin stars. Kamui finally realizes that his search is over as the two swing at him, sending off a massive blast. Yet the darn thing survives. Ultimately, Kamui lets them know he's itching for them to level up. If not, he suggests they pop out the Miko, so he can face them and complete his dream of wiping out all exorcists. Kamui then leaves and the two pass out from exhaustion. Days later, Benio and Rokuro are back at the Seika dormitory with their friends to celebrate the Tanabata festival. Everyone's writing their wishes and hanging it up, but Rokuro can't think of one. Just then Benio comes in with noodles and her so-called Benio sauce. Poor Itsushi befalls the misfortune of giving it a taste and almost dying as Rokuro and Benio get into a fight over her serving the vomit-worthy sauce, unaware that Mayura just arrived. To her, the fight for some reason looks like a lovey-dovey talk, and she goes all jealous, pouncing on Rokuro like she always does. Nevertheless, the three of them settle and Rokuro asks what Benio's going to wish for, only to discover that the lady's scripting a whole Ohagi Man series instead. Behind them, Ryogo hangs up his wish to bless all the members of the Seika dormitory with health. He, Atsushi, and Shinosuke recall how the previous year's been, especially with Rokuro going from a women desperate rejected meatball to directly being practically engaged to Benio. Thanks Arima. The realization makes poor Atsushi mentally stroke and he starts scribbling, wishing for a girlfriend. Nevertheless, Ryogo can't be happier to see Rokuro back into exorcism, but now he hopes that Rokuro doesn't hurt himself in the process. While Benio continues her Ohagi Man series, Mayura notices her and Rokuro's injuries. She realizes that there's no way she can stop Rokuro anymore. Man's back into exorcism neck deep. She hangs up her wish for Rokuro to be safe. However, behind it the poor girl also wrote a wish for Rokuro to realize that she has a crush on him. Meanwhile in Kyoto, Seijin shows up at the bath while Shimon's relaxing. Shimon comments on Seijin's scars and Seijin tells him to be prepared since a massive fight with the Basara will soon break loose. Hearing that, Shimon largely questions how Rokuro was even able to face Kamui, making Seijin remind him that Rokuro's preparing to fight against the impurity corruption that killed his friends. Such dedication in that arm of his makes him a literally Goku-level opponent. That is if he stops being a creep. At the same time, Arima and Subaru discuss the twin stars and their fate while chilling in a fancy bath. Arima is determined to make Rokuro and Benio a married couple at any cost, the two of whom have finally written down their wishes, and surprisingly both of them wish to get stronger with each other. One fine morning, Rokuro and Benio stroll in, only to catch Seijin making a quick exit after chit-chat with Zenkichi. He passes by with the classic cold look. Once he's out the door, Zenkichi tells Rokuro that Ryogo got called by Fushihara to some part. There he introduces Ryogo to Haruka, a newbie at the IM branch, and plays Cupid, leaving Ryogo with a date duty. Poor Ryogo's all quiet and awkward, but guess what? Haruka finds it absolutely adorable and even asks him out for another round. The news spreads like wildfire at Seika, and Rokuro couldn't care less, but he's jealous and shocked all at once. Meanwhile at Kyoto, Shimon confronts Arima about why he's deployed Seijin and Narukami, almost wondering if Arima's overburdening him. But the man can never be serious and tosses another one of his steamy mags in Shimon's face. Nevertheless, Ryogo continues on his cute dates with Haruka and gets all shy when the lady flirts around with him. One day, he goes to the daycare where Fushihara works and asks him if it is okay for him to continue dating Haruka. He reasons that exorcists die and the thought of it makes him worry. Fushihara gives the dude a reality check, which is basically saying that he ain't as important an exorcist as he thinks. Exorcists like Rokuro are far more significant while people like him work at the back. However, being ordinary means he can have meaningful bonds and enjoy his relationship. That day Ryogo thanks him for the lecture and bids goodbye, but he has no idea what's coming next. Soon news floats in that Fushihara has been killed by an impurity. He rushes out to meet Haruka while Rokuro confronts Zenkichi to spill the beans. Finally, the old man explains that impurity corruptions have been spreading across Narukami recently. That is why Seijin is deployed here. Later, while out on a walk, Rokuro and Benio run into an impurity only to realize that it's an impurity corruption. The two try their newly discovered trick of resonating and fail when suddenly Seijin comes into the scene and snaps away the thing within seconds. He then turns to the two of them, scolding them that they are dead weight as exorcists if they can't fight, and shoos them out of the place. Behind him, the defeated impurity's corpse is revealed to be the dead, corrupted body of poor Fushihara. Days later, Ryogo and Haruka visit the daycare to greet Fushihara's kids when a staff member hands Ryogo a picture of him with them, something he truly treasured when alive. Nevertheless, after the big scolding from Seijin, both Rokuro and Benio have turned into super sulkers. The two can't go anywhere without their face drooping, and Mayura notices it as clear as day. Yet Rokuro's being bratty to her. At Seiko, Seijin tells Zenkichi all about Fushihara's corruption, and the old man feels bad for Seijin handling all of the tough work on his own. However, Seijin says he prefers handling it alone. Later he runs into Mayura, and the two sit down for some wholesome father-daughter time, only for Seijin to dread the whole atmosphere. He asks Mayura why she even calls him a father when he practically abandoned her and his wife for exorcist duty. Mayura says she and mom know that he took the step to protect the two before confronting if he's the reason behind Rokuro and Benio being total sad sacks. Once she's discovered the reason, Mayura shows up at the villa with some decent food and fried fish for Kanako. She gives the two a good scolding, reversing Seijin's effect, and even half-heartedly accepts their so-called marriage. Later on, Rokuro leaves to drop Mayura off, once again thanking her for cheering them up. Mayura tells him that she's accepted him going back to exorcisms. She was scared of him returning because she didn't want him to get hurt again, but now that she has seen him fight, she knows Rokuro's true essence is in being an exorcist and fully supports him. Rokuro cannot be more grateful when suddenly Mayura collapses into Rokuro's horror. Green lines appear on her body, a sign of impurity corruption. Her body rises up, morphing into a horrid impurity, and Rokuro absolutely loses it. His trauma pulses through his veins as Benio desperately tries to control him. Just then Seijin arrives once again and heartlessly says that Mayura is no longer herself. She's an impurity that must be exorcised to death. Rokuro can barely hold himself, making Benio place a hand on his shoulder. That's when the two of them strangely hear Mayura calling out to them. Benio realizes that there must be a skill exclusive to the twin stars that can help Mayura, and they rush up to Seijin, telling him about the voices and begging him for a solution. Seijin realizes it's time and explains about Furu no Kodo, a technique that he believes only the twin star exorcists can do through their resonance. However, it can totally flop. Nevertheless, Seijin restrains Mayura while Rokuro and Benio team up chanting, and to their immense happiness Mayura becomes purified. Poor Rokuro breaks down as realization hits him and sobs, wishing if only he could use the technique back in Hanatsuki. However, just then Yuta appears before the group, congratulating Rokuro. Seeing Yuta's face is all it took for Rokuro to turn into madman. The guy goes rabid, knowing all too well that it was Yuta behind Mayura's corruption. Yuta smiles, mocking Rokuro for not being up to his expectations and inciting the guy to come at him, but Seijin stops him, explaining that the two of them have barely any energy to attack after Furu no Kodo. They don't stand a chance in front of Yuta. Yuta, on the other hand, is annoyed by Seijin spoiling the game and decides to eliminate his ex-master altogether. He fires up the bullet talisman technique, only his are the size of an asteroid. He shoots, seemingly annihilating Seijin, yet the man emerges all Super Saiyan. After all, he's one of the 12 guardians. Seijin then brandishes his sliver arm, ready to put Yuta to some good sleep, and charges. His blow moves Yuta to tears, and for a second it seems Seijin won the battle, until his arm literally explodes like a paint balloon. The scene makes Rokuro scream and uncontrollably zap towards Yuta when suddenly Seijin puts himself in between the two, taking the lethal crash. He then cages him and Benio into a protective barrier and refuses to let anything happen to the twin stars. With that, he tells Rokuro to pick up something he left for him with Zenkichi, thanking him for saving Mayura and strolling into his final moments. He powers up all his energy, unleashing a massive blast. Yet, when the dust settles, Rokuro emerges holding Seijin in his arms. My man even throws a punch at Yuta's face. Still, Yuta shamelessly invites Rokuro to join him, promising to spare his current friends from impurity corruption. He hops off, telling Rokuro to meet him at Hanatsuki, as if organizing a sinister family reunion. Soon, both Mayura and Seijin are rushed to the hospital in critical conditions. Rokuro is beyond devastated and completely collapses. At the hospital, Zenkichi tells him that even if Seijin survives, he'll probably never fight in the Megano again. He then hands him the case Seijin had left for Rokuro. Inside is a red master talisman and the black exorcist uniform Seijin used to wear back in Hanatsuki. He had promised to give it to Rokuro once he became the all-powerful exorcist. Zenkichi tells Rokuro that a union out of the 12 guardians is being assembled to take Yuta down, but Rokuro refuses to play any more traps. That night, he appears outside Benio's room, declaring that he'll kill Yuta for good, and she opens the door to find him donning the black uniform. To his surprise, Benio agrees and decides to join him. The two get down to business, and no, not the kind you guys are thinking of. I mean, they get down to training. Benio shows up with a sack almost as big as her ego, filled with all sorts of weapons and talismans, getting Rokuro a bit too excited, until she reminds him of the lethality Yuta possesses. The only thing that might work against that demon rat is the twin star's resonance. They start trying to figure out how to activate the resonance and how long they can keep it going. Still, they focus, with Benio thinking about her parents' death and Rokuro about Yuta's crimes, until they glow and resonate hard enough to crack the whole wall in front of them. Meanwhile, in Hanatsuki, Yuta lays down lilies for each one of his victims, awaiting Rokuro to show up. Back in the arena, Benio insists on taking a break, but Rokuro, being the stubborn brat he is, refuses and continues practicing with the Red Master Talisman. That night, Benio is haunted by nightmares of her brother and runs out in fear. She arrives at Kenu's door all shaky, even refusing to eat. The old woman takes her hand, assuring that it's okay to chicken out sometimes, but also encouraging Benio not to make any decisions that might turn into regrets. Hearing that, Benio gathers her courage and returns to the arena, only to find Rokuro asleep on the floor with a whole wall crumpled. She then lays down beside him, feeling the first wave of affection for Rokuro, and snoozes off, only for the idiot to freak out when he wakes up. The next morning, Rokuro reveals that his arm is actually a part of impurity corruption. Like his friends, he was also corrupted by Yuta, but for some reason, he didn't go full-on impurity mode and ended up exorcising the kids. Benio grabs his hand, almost making the dude turn apple red, and says that she can never make up for what her brother committed. However, Rokuro dismisses her and says that he's glad she joined him. With that, the two of them dress down in their black uniforms and get ready to kick Yuta for good. They descend into the ruins of Hanatsuki, where Yuto eagerly awaits them. Rokuro spots the guy twirling a white lily in hand. He then proposes they join hands for the last time or become his lily receivers. When Rokuro, true to form, declines, the man takes it as quite an insult, especially since Rokuro brought his silly little sister Benio along. He remarks that it seems the two of them learned nothing from witnessing Seijun's crumpled state. Before they realize it, Yuto is right behind them, so close that he could give them a lethal ear scratch. However, the twin stars are ready for action. Benio swoops down, grabs Rokuro's hand, and sends the rotten egg flying out of the dormitory. The fight now spills outside, and when Yuto emerges unscathed, Rokuro can hardly contain himself. He finally whips out the ultimate Red Master talisman, enchanting his impurity-corrupted arm and torching Yuta. And would you believe that he still survives? Unbeknownst to them, somewhere Kamui is observing the trio in action. Back in the clash, Yuto appears as if he's possessed, morphing into his impurity form and claiming he's merely holding back. He reverts to his human form, laughing and berating the twin stars when suddenly, a ray of hope glimmers. Yuto coughs up blood. The sight prompts Rokuro to attack immediately, not willing to let the opportunity slip, only to realize it was all part of Yuto's classic drama. Laughing, Yuto manages to land a close-range blow on Rokuro. Benio screams and tries to back him up, but Yuto's had enough of her hopping around. To Rokuro's horror, he disables Benio's super-fast legs, leaving her puddled on the floor and completely petrified. He then turns to finish off Rokuro. However, that's when something entirely unexpected occurs. Benio's eyes once again widen when Kamui appears before her. He offers to give her impurity legs, playing a twisted version of Let's Make a Deal, but with impurity body parts as prizes. The peculiar fellow has a talent for boosting the power of his future opponents and starts counting down. Benio takes up the deal to go semi-impurity and put an end to Yuta. That is if she manages to not become totally corrupted. Green lines cover her body, and she finds herself floating in some cosmic space, slowly losing herself to dark matter when suddenly Rokuro's iconic shout makes way, waking her up, and out she comes reborn. She plops down before Yuta, respectfully bowing and asking him to die at her hands. With that, she charges at her brother and puts up an epic show that even makes Kamui proud at what he's given her. To Rokuro's extreme surprise, she lethally tap dances onto the poor thing. Yuto takes a swing, but Benio soaks it up, asking for more and serving it back right in his pretty face. It's not long before his cool guy facade breaks. Turns out Yuto had been taking in serious blows and injuries from her and Rokuro's resonating attacks. He finally seems to be on the failing end until he maniacally pops up screaming that Benio's time's up, and true to his word, Benio collapses. Her impurity legs are far too powerful for her to handle, and they have finally given out under her. Yuto prepares to end her, but Rokuro comes in between, and to Benio's horror, Yuto punches a literal pop socket into him. Yet Rokuro refuses to give in and glows golden, healing himself and tapping into his impurity element. At this point, Yuto realizes he's up against Rokuro's impurity form and transforms. The two former buddies go fist to fist, and for some strange reason, Rokuro's heart fills with sorrow as he remembers all the good times they had back in Hanatsuki. But the man in front of him is nothing short of a demon from the deepest valley of hell, and Rokuro finally lands the epic blow, sending the dude off for the Milky Way. With that, Benio crawls over to his limp body and is relieved to find him still breathing. The brawl has finally come to an end. Rokuro wakes up in Kyoto, finding Benio in a wheelchair. The two are summoned before the now 11 guardians, and instead of a pat on the back, these ungrateful folks scold them for going solo. Arima explains that their only job is to bring Miko into the world, making Rokuro mentally lose it and in a fit of craziness, propose to Benio in front of everyone. Benio turns tomato red, but luckily, Rokuro was just flexing his sarcasm muscles. He tells Arima that he won't burden an unborn child with such a huge task. He's ready to face the impurity himself, along with Yuta, and so Arima gives them a chance to level up in the next 2 years until a big impurity situation hits. If they prove themselves as the real deal twin exorcists, he'll buy into their demands. That night, the two of them stroll around a festival, and Rokuro buys Benio a new pair of hair ties, replacing the ones from Yuto. It finally looks like their lovers' quarrels are going to turn into something serious, because Benio's heart begins pumping with feelings for the cherry boy. Meanwhile, Mayura finds her now one-armed father on some rooftop and asks him to train her as an exorcist. She wishes to give her two friends a hand. Time goes down the road, and Rokuro and Benio find themselves in the midst of a heated battle with some troublesome impurity, including Haruka and Mayura and their crew. A nervous Mayura joins the battle reluctantly since it's her debut and prepares a spell for the leader of the impurity swarm. Rokuro and Benio themselves help her out, all the while having their signature lovers quarrel. They land a combo onto the impurity only for Mayura to accidentally end up using her own spell on herself. Nevertheless, after some awkward moments, quick explanations and words of encouragement to Mayura, it is time for the three to head on to their first day of high school. A lot of things have changed over the last 2 years, more specifically Rokuro, who went from rejected ugly boy to being popular. He has been working hard, both physically and mentally, between studies for school and exorcist work ever since the last fight with Yudo. Guess you can say the boy has finally become a responsible man now. After school, Benio and Mayura chat about Benio living with Rokuro for 2 years. Mayura, who noticed Benio's very obvious feelings towards Rokuro, tell her to take cues from shoujo manga. She calls it the romance Bible of 4 million maidens. Poor girls had completely given up on her childhood crush and claimed that if Benio reads it, things would soon get spicy. At home, Rokuro and Benio talk. In light of the past 2 years, Rokuro realizes that he honestly cannot imagine life without Benio any longer. However, Benio raises the whole baby thing. This transforms into an awkward discussion. And believe it or not, both appear to be more ready to have one together. They might not have uncovered their sentiments towards each other yet. However, it is clear the two of them are considering their duties as twin stars to be absolutely vital. Soon, another hole appears in the sky like the one Commander's underpants Arima had warned them about 2 years earlier. It is time for the twin stars to prove themselves. After another impurity appears the following day, Rokuro sees a strange light, which only he can see. He goes to it, with everyone else following, only to find a mysterious little girl. She comes off as friendly and even smiles towards everyone, well except Benio. They decide to take her home, thinking that impurity left her there. However, in the distance, Seijin and Zenkichi talk about similar case years ago. Rokuro names the little girl Sae since she doesn't know her name. She quickly becomes attached to him as well. Since the little girl is even calling Rokuro Papa, Rokuro decides to watch over her. She spends her time reading encyclopedias while the two make dinner, and after some more playing, the three go to bed. Benio does not think she is really cut out to be a parent yet, and everything seems to be moving too fast. The following day, Sae sings a song from the story Benio told her last night, which makes her happy as she, Rokuro, and Mayura go to school. But on their way, a strange smoke fills the air as people start collapsing. It turns out this miasma may be causing the beginning stages for impurity corruption, and on a much bigger scale, with people literally dropping left and right. An impurity corruption's grand opening, and it's not sparing anyone while spreading faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Even though exorcists appear to be less affected, the tough-as-nails exorcists aren't fully immune. At the same time, impurity are still able to cross into the real world. To their horror, massive bodies of them begin stomping around the city, and Benio and Rokuro quickly go to defeat them. They tell Mayura to go and alert the others before hopping off desperately to find the source of this chaos. Meanwhile, in Kyoto, 11 of the 12 guardians meet with Arima presiding over the group. He mentions that another one of the dragon spots has opened, spilling in the massive amount of impurity corruption, and with things going massively downhill, Arima tells the guardians to prepare themselves to be worked to death. Back at the dorm, Mayura arrives rushing in and telling the group about the impurity party breaking outside. Seijin immediately shoots up, telling the group to split, only for Sae to climb onto him. Mayura objects to him taking Sae out, but he replies she's the safest near Rokuro and leaves. Back in the town, there is panic everywhere. The people with enough spell power are running for their lives. A young couple runs into a bunch of impurity, and the jerk of a boyfriend pushes his lover into a swarm of impurity to save himself. While escaping, he meets a woman who is supposedly the main villain for this arc. She talks about equivalent exchange in a really random way after doing a whole mini live concert with her minions, and then kills him afterwards. Anyways, Rokuro and Benio meet up with Seijin and the others at the dragon spots. Seijin brings Sae alongside him because he thinks Sae has some tie to it, but she does not sense anything clearly. Either way, they need to deal with the impurity in the area. Just when the squad starts to get a bit overwhelmed by the impurity, the strange woman from earlier defeats them all in an instant and also introduces herself as a Basara named Suzu. Anyway, she leaves after showing some interest in Sae. Once she's off, it is up to the squad to try and close the dragon spot, although they struggle a bit initially. This is solved through combined resonance of Rokuro and Benio. However, despite the thing being closed shut, Seijin speculates other spots all over Japan may open. Rokuro and Benio know that only resonance may close it, so it is up to them to travel to put an end to the chaos. Soon the two are off on a road trip to help close the other dragon spots. The news is currently covering up the problem by saying it is an influenza breakout, but exorcists know the truth will soon be revealed, thanks to the social media where the impurity attack news is spreading like wildfire. Of course, the internet never behaves. This only prompts Benio and Rokuro to leave sooner together with Sae. Meanwhile, Ryogo, Atsushi, and Shinosuke decide to stay behind and handle things at Narukami. Just then an RV drives up and sends the group hollering once Rokuro tells them it's literally possessed by Kanako. He had found the abandoned thing in the house's garage and put it to some good use. Lucky them, the vehicle even has a barrier around it. As they arrive at their first destination, the place is literally covered in dark aura with corrupted people littered around like rats. They soon reach the exorcists, where one of the salty exorcist dude called Kumashiro right off the bat does not like Benio. Benio does not let the guy's anger get to her and asks Rokuro to calm down. Nevertheless, the group captain Kiyomi shows up and breaks up that little argument. She also notices that Benio and Rokuro, being the twin stars, will one day have kids and does a quick reading on them, only to see that they already have one once Sae comes in calling Rokuro Papa. Classic. Later that night, Benio works on her talismans and Sae, being the curious little girl, asks what it is about. Benio tells her it is important and does not want to be bothered, making Sae run off to the captain and talks with her. Benio overhears, and Sae talks a lot about the things Benio taught her, from the stories and how important the talismans are. Soon, the following day, the squad leaves to put an end to the dragon spot in the area. Rokuro and Benio are part of the fight, leaving Sae with Kanako. A talisman flies out of the RV and Sae, realizing it is important for Benio, goes to find her. Meanwhile, Rokuro and Benio face a strong impurity. Their attacks struggle to land, but it turns out it is a Basara named Moro. This thing likes to feed off the soul energy of the people like last night's leftovers. Well, she prefers quality over quantity, and now the quality finally stands before her in the shape of the twin stars. She seems pretty glad that the exorcists are riled up for a fight. The entity zaps towards Kumashiro, kissing the life out of him, only for Benio to save the dude. To his surprise, she responds saying that she does not need a reason to save someone. With that, Benio unleashes her crazy impurity leg dance, making Moro compliment her lethality. The creepy thing even weirdly licks them, only to notice that they have the scent of Kamui. Moro then rips up Benio's talismans, without which they have no way to close the portal, but leave it to Sae, who shows up and delivers one that Benio had left behind. Benio was not pleased by the actions and yells at her. However, not wanting to waste C's efforts, they quickly close the portal. Later that evening, Benio apologizes to Sae, who simply smiles and offers her something to munch on. However, the situation is getting worse. More and more dragon spots keep opening. At Kyoto, Subaru and Arima go over the events until he asks the lady to investigate the matter immediately. Meanwhile, at Narukami, Mayura helps cleanse the corrupted civilians while the TV blares the still fake news of an influenza breakout. Zenkichi comments that currently the 12 guardians are spread all over, closing the portals or helping put a stop to the threat. Not just this, but the threats are getting more dangerous. It may soon be known to the public about exorcists and the situation that they are in. Meanwhile, the twin stars are on to their next destination, which is quite a bumpy ride thanks to Kanako going around with his retarded GPS. Nevertheless, Sae seems to enjoy the ride and making origami. She even makes an ohagi version of it, pleasing Benio as well. Rokuro then comments that the next dragon spot seems to be near an amusement park, making him remember when Mayura had taken him to one, back when he was being a sad sack over Benio's arrival. His memories, however, become a point of interest for Sae, and he tells her that an amusement park is filled with lights, only to arrive at a miasma-filled gloomy dump of an amusement park. Soon they meet the exorcists in charge, and they immediately tell them that there is an impurity at threat level of a true serpent, which means it is about to turn into a Basara. Suddenly, Sae goes missing, panicking Rokuro and Benio, who are unaware that she's ran into the amusement park trying to ride the still rides. There, a lion-faced impurity spots her. Only the little one can't be bothered and hands him a lion-faced origami. The impurity then asks her where he can find something beautiful. The only such thing to Sae is her family, and so she begins guiding the thing over to them. When suddenly Rokuro comes and crashes at the entity and screaming for it to stay away from Sae. To Rokuro and Benio horror, the impurity runs away with Sae into the thick miasma. However, the lion impurity does not hurt Sae at all. Once she wakes up, he points at the still Ferris wheel, asking her if it's pretty when it's moving. The impurity strangely seems to be wondering about the world and tells Sae how he wants to see something beautiful. He does not care about eating humans. He just wishes to see something beautiful. Sae says the place is ran by adults, so Mr. Lion goes looking for one while Sae promises to wait for him, and the two of them become quite close. Meanwhile, Rokuro and Benio are stocking up on talismans before they head out when Benio remembers the impurity talking about finding something beautiful. While the massive thing is walking around the miasma-filled city looking for someone to make the Ferris wheel move, Rokuro and Benio manage to find Sae rather quickly. She sits happily making more origami and tells the two that she promised Mr. Lion to wait for him. However, after searching, falling, and coming to a realization, Mr. Lion returns to the amusement park. Rokuro goes to attack him immediately, only to notice that he is crying. Mr. Lion realizes that he is not meant to be in the human world. He is not going to ruin it. But at that very moment the lights turn on, his face lights up. As he gazes at the beauty of the sparkling park, a shot pierces through its chest. Rokuro and Benio turn to find 2 of the 12 guardians, Sada and Ziz, standing behind them. They grow angry at the 2, stating that it is their job to destroy impurity and that it should not cloud their judgment even if there is one like Mr. Lion. Though Sae sees the park lit up, Rokuro and Benio had to sadly tell her that Mr. Lion went home. With that, she spots the origami lion on the ground that she gave to him and hides it away. Even this Basara was ultimately a 1-episode character, but his gentle bonding time with Sae does give the Basara characterization that they've been lacking up until now. However, the twin stars together with Sai continue on their journey. One day, while making their way to the next destination, the 3 of them watch a video of the famous pitcher, Kawae's. Only in real life, this guy's a lazy rat. One of his teammates asks him to join them in practice, but he excuses himself, saying he's old, unable to contribute in the game, and his arms aching. Suddenly, an uproar breaks out. Thick miasma begins filling into the stadium as the dome crashes open, and lo and behold, at another one those impurity pooping holes, a dragon spot. Back in the RV, Mayura rings Benio, telling her all the information she's gathered regarding the dragon spots so far. The spots are of various sizes, with sometimes a few large ones opening while other times a large amount of small ones. Just then, Zenkichi bursts in, reporting that a massive dragon spot has opened up in HI, and before we know it, Rokuro and Benio drop in to meet another Basara, Yamato. The entity blocks off the street. 2 of the 12 guardians, Iroy and Cordelia, soon arrive, smashing the Basara's wall to pieces. They then tell Rokuro and Benio to withdraw, and the group hops away together. At the RV, they try planning their next attack when Kawae shows up with a sick kid. Iroy quickly heals the little one, only for him and Sae to start staring the famed pitcher. But the old man walks out, saying his career is long expired. Cordelia, who had been sitting outside this whole time, suddenly senses hell, and she's right, because near the dragon spot, Yamato begins merging impurities into one supermassive entity. The thing starts crawling towards the population, making Cordelia and Iroy leave immediately. However, they ban the twin stars from following, saying they are supposed to be doing something else. Inside the thick miasma, the battle begins, with Cordelia going full transformer and rivaling the size of Yamato's massive impurity. However, even after being knocked down and sliced in half, the entity keeps growing. Rokuro and Benio watch from afar, realizing that there's going to be no end to it if the dragon spot remains open. Kawae desperately tries to stop them, only for the 2 to tell him that it's their duty. Quite a shocker for the baseball player, who keeps slacking hard. The man's self-respect wakes up, and he guides the twin stars through a shortcut to the point, and even pitches off impurities while they try to close the thing. Ultimately, Yamato's power weakens, and Cordelia is able to fizzle off the massive entity. HI soon returns back to normal. Kawae is sent off in the ambulance, promising that he'll return to playing, and Sae waves goodbye to the 2 guardians. In the mystical realm of Magana, Basara buddies Mamachi and Chijua are chowing down on the disgusting mass of some gurgling impurity. Just as they're getting their supernatural snack on, another Basara bursts onto the scene. This one seems like a hotshot and goes by the name of Kirinashi. At first, Mamachi definitely does not take a liking to the dude, but once he pours the details, he finds the task quite interesting. He greets the 2 before telling them about twin star exorcists and their mini family tour across Japan and shutting down dragon spots. Mamachi and Chijua find this whole family road trip idea pretty hilarious, especially the part about the twin stars and their fancy resonance gimmick. Kirinashi wants them to show down with the stars. Confident as ever, our 2 impurities crunching pals are ready to show off their own moves. Why, unlike Rokuro and Benio, who are all lovey-dovey, Mamachi and Chijua are the real deal, actual twins. Meanwhile, traveling in their RV, Benio and Rokuro comment on how easily Sae was hopping around in the miasma back at the amusement park. She was totally unaffected. Rokuro even speculates that she's probably some top dog exorcist child. However, while they are playing the guessing game somewhere, a trio from the 12 Guardians is shutting down many dragon spots. Quite an amusing group of characters. One's a cheapskate named Yuji, another is a nerd named Arata, and the third, Kankuro, seems like he's got some look issues and wears a mask. Back in the RV, the Twin Star family is having fun with some light rock, paper, and scissors game. Only the idiot Rokuro is miserably failing, unlike Benio, who gets the catch pretty smoothly. The 2 naturally start yelling at each other when suddenly their RV ends up in the Magana. They are suddenly surrounded by a horde of impurities. Thanks to Kanako, he puts the whole vehicle in overdrive, but is totally taken by surprise when web-like strings topple them out of the RV like some candy, and they are soon greeted by the impurities' twins. The 2 waste no time and immediately declare the Twin Star their next meal. They value quality, and this duo of humans just happens to be a fine dining platter straight from a 5-star eatery. Just as Kanako hops away with Sai, both Rokuro and Benio fire up their fancy limbs. Rokuro powers up the smashing arm while Benio hops down with her legs. Mamachi and Chijuwa are amused with their little kindergarten school show and flick them off like some mosquito despite Rokuro and Benio going full force at the two of them. To them, they happen to be nothing more than but Walmart heroes. The twin stars then try their luck with the resonance and epically fail, giving the impurity duo another thing to snicker on. The two end up trapped in their impurity spider threads as Mamachi and Chijuwa begin to explain their uselessness. Unlike them, both of them are actually two arms of one existence. They have been born as the ultimate duo, perfected to the core so much that none of them needs to use words in order to resonate and unleash the attack. They can merely use telepathy within milliseconds and form and execute their attacks together. With that, the two of them prepare to end the twin stars when suddenly Sai jumps in between, pretty much surprising the whole group when she forms a barrier repelling the Basara's attack. However, that makes the two even more enthusiastic and they decide to consume the little girl as their dessert. Suddenly, the trio of Guardian drops in, introducing themselves and neutralizing the attack on the little girl. They immediately shift the battle to the real world when Yujii literally begins charging Rokuro and Benio for helping them out. However, the twin stars totally refuse the grand help and surprisingly the trio gladly excuses. They ain't dancing where they are not respected. Rokuro and Benio then step forward, angered that these two hotshots tried attacking Sai. This time they seem to power up differently, and for a second Mamachi warned Chijuwa. Despite that, the two go ahead with the attack and are surprised when the twin stars manage to overtake them, this time leaving the ground dented meteor-like. Chijuwa panics upon seeing Mamachi lying with a literal gaping hole in his chest when suddenly a dragon spot opens and out comes Kuranashi, dragging in both Mamachi and Chijuwa back in the Megano, snatching the finishing blow from the twin stars. Behind them, the trio of Guardians comments that they've finally managed to find Kuranashi, and two of them immediately enter Megano while Arata stays behind to close the dragon spot, after which he bids goodbye to the twin stars entering the Megano, while and leaving the family hugging Sai out in relief. Meanwhile in the Megano, Mamachi lays in pain, calling out to Chijuwa, but before his other half could make it to him, Kuranashi appears, ripping out the poor dude's heart and killing him. Once Chijuwa appears, he frames the murder on the twin stars and absorbs all of Mamachi's spell power into Chijuwa, making him the ultimate Thanos of impurity. The Basara is beyond mad. Meanwhile, the twin stars are back in their RV questioning C's power. They wonder who she really is and try asking the little girl, but she has no idea about how she created the shield to save the two from the Basara's attack. Strangely enough, she then points them towards Kyoto, saying that she has a feeling to go there, and so the RV takes the route to Kyoto. If you liked what you saw, consider subscribing to the channel and stay tuned for more quality uploads.